to today's episode of Bump to Business Owner. I'm your host, Caroline Marshall, and today I am welcoming Jessica Heagran, the founder of Career After Babies. Jessica's first business, That Works For Me, she founded after a horrible return to her very senior role in a finance company at 5 months postpartum, which led her to quit her job. Her first company was a platform to help parents find part-time and flexible work, which meant she spoke to thousands of other women who had similar experiences to her own. This led to Jess realizing she could not understand why this hadn't been spoken about. So Jess interrogated, analysed, and drew many conclusions from 848 women across the UK from all industries, and she released the Career After Babies report in 2023. It exposed what many of us would expect on this podcast here: the uncomfortable truth. Not only all of this, but Jess has 4 children of her own, 3 daughters and a son who she wants to work in a different world to the one she did. Wow, Jess, thank you so much. And I think we really do need to talk about how you achieved all of this while raising 4 children.
Uh, I would say a very supportive husband.
Yes,
Fortunate
yes.
enough to have a partner. It's a big
Is
part
he
of it.
self-employed as well? Or how?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he is. So when we had our first daughter, he was working full time in a really intense role. And after about 3 months of not seeing her, he just came home one day and was like, I can't do this. Like he just really missed her. So he quit at that point and he went self-employed. We've always sort of worked in a bit of a seesaw way, actually. So I was employed, he went self-employed, he built his business up, and then I quit employment and went self-employed. And it has its pros and cons. I think most self-employed people will tell you it's a bit of feast or famine at times, but
Yeah.
the benefit of that is that we get to work around the children. We can be there for them between those sort of critical hours of between kind of 4 and 7, and then 4 nights a week we sit on the sofa next to each other, not talking, working on our laptops.
Oh,
Hey,
that sounds similar to mine and me and my husband. Yeah. And, he's not self-employed at the minute, has dreams of doing things. But I think that's what's always really helpful is just like kind of both of you being really open-minded, isn't it? Of like, okay, at some point Jess is going to be like off doing something big and I'll be at home and then vice versa kind of thing.
And it works for us both. I mean, from day one, I always said to him, look, this baby that is growing inside me is our baby, right? That's not just mine, just because it's
Yeah.
in. So I was always very kind of transparent about how I wanted us to parent from that perspective, which he was always in agreement with. We're both quite open about the fact that I was the much higher earner at that point, and I'd really, invested in my career and got to quite a senior position quite young. And he'd changed a couple of times, so we're still sort of starting out in many senses. So yeah, we were okay with that. It meant that when I went back to work, back to employment the first time around, he was able to stop that job that he was in and like I said, start up his own business, which meant that when we went through the tough times with the nursery sickness and all that type of thing, he was there to pick up the pieces.
Oh, that's so good to hear that you got that like positive side from it, because I'd love to chat to you more about your return to work and how that kind of felt for you, because I fellow mum who returned to work very quickly, and I think my first thought when I come across someone like myself like you is did you get quite a lot of judgment from this outside of work as well, and like told that, oh, you won't feel that way once the baby comes along? I'd love to know how that experience was for you.
Yeah, do you know what? Before I had her, definitely. And I remember my boss saying to me at the time, Jess, I think you'll feel differently, but if that's what you want to do, then do it. And they were kind of supportive from that perspective.
Mm.
I don't remember it being a massive thing from outside work. I think I'd always been such a career girl that no one was really surprised. The only person who seemed surprised about how it all went, to be honest, was me. Everyone else was just like, well, yeah. I think maybe I'm one of those people who can't always be told things. Have to
Yes,
do
yes,
them
I
myself.
relate to that.
Yeah. So there wasn't a huge amount, especially from family, of them saying do it differently. I think they will kind of she'll do what she wants to do anyway. So yeah, that's how it panned out. But I think most people are, aren't they, just absolutely floored by motherhood.
Mm.
I didn't love pregnancy, but I think there was an end in sight for that. So it was just a case of
Yeah,
kind of head down and get through it. People
yeah,
always
yeah.
how people have you got 4 children if you hate pregnancy? But like I said, it's for a limited period of time, so you can do that.
Mm.
But yeah, I wasn't expecting to feel the way I did, and actually, I often question if I had gone back into, I guess, just to give people the context a little bit. So I was a director of strategy and distribution for a big insurance company. Had worked, I was the only female member of the team. I was the youngest, I think, in the whole business by some,
Wow.
some distance. And I'd worked long and hard to get there and to get to that position. And I just thought that that's what I wanted. And I kind of question whether, had my return been smoother and had I not felt all of the kind of pain and upset and emotional distress and everything that came with it, then might things have gone differently? I don't know. Could I have found a way to make it work? I think we're talking sort of 9-10 years ago now, which is,
Mm.
I think it is a very different landscape, and it does sound like a long time, horrifyingly long time, but it doesn't feel like it. But I think even pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think the context of work is quite different, and the conversations are certainly different. Or is that just me being caught up in the bubble of what I do? Never
Th-
quite sure.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I do think, because I'm in that world as well, and I feel, but then the more I speak to women, and a lot of my friends have had children in the past few years, and don't get me wrong, some with had great experiences. One is currently having her second baby at a company she's been with, and they've just told, like, she looked at their new policy and it's way better than with her first, and it's a great policy. So it is like change in certain companies, but plenty of industries. And I think actually that kind of brings me on to a point I was going to mention, is that talking about how it didn't go well for you. As actually a lot of women that come on this podcast that have NDAs, and so I know their story, but I can't bring it on the podcast, which is sad. And they don't feel, obviously they can't talk about it, but I do wonder. I think there's definitely change in some industries, which is great, and let's carry on with that. But are we in a bubble of like trying to make change and trying to talk about it, and then there's whole industries not like this?
Yeah, I think it's so I get direct messages on LinkedIn every single day from women having bad experiences. So I'm not blind to the fact that it's not that this isn't an issue. And actually there is no way that I would have scope for doing the things that I'm doing now if it wasn't an issue. It still is massively. I think what is different is that there are a tranche of organizations who acknowledge it and genuinely believe in inclusivity and the value that every individual brings to their organization, and therefore do something about keeping them in. And I think that's the bit that I don't know, did that exist before to this
Yeah.
level? Probably not, because I think actually
No.
diversity and inclusion, if you just look at I saw some stats not long ago actually on the explosion of that as a job title. 10 years ago, having a head of diversity wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Now actually you're the exception if you don't have somebody who's focusing on this sort of things. There's definitely been a journey there, but we've still got a long way to go to get this right.
And which is why you exist. And yeah, it's actually why 10 years ago,
Yeah.
businesses like yours didn't exist. So that is the positive, like we can absolutely take from this. And I actually have a hard relate. If I had things hadn't gone so badly at my employment role and kind of then also been handled so badly, would I have left and, well, I didn't leave, I was made redundant, but would I have started my own business kind of thing, or just cracked on and just carried on? And I think,
Yeah.
especially as you said, your husband could do the nursery sickness stuff. They just think, I mean, women who before us did that, didn't they? And is that, do you feel that perhaps could have been your case?
Oh, I don't know. It's impossible to say, isn't it? It's the shoulda,
Yeah.
woulda, coulda thing. But I think the thing that I do know is that there were difficulties from both sides. So I quite often talk about being that the only female member of that team made it exceptionally difficult, perhaps just perceived difficulty from my perspective of being able to talk about it. So I didn't want to be the woman in the corner who's weeping about not seeing her kid all the time, or
Yeah.
crying about the fact that my boobs are like leaking onto my work shirt and feeling about, that all of
Yeah.
those things that are really very normal for you as a mum. I just struggled to reconcile this work Jess with this mum Jess that I hadn't really got my head around yet. And I think that's taken me a long time to kind of reconcile those two characters into the person I am today. And I know a lot of people talk about kind of being their authentic selves and stuff, which I used to not really understand what that meant. But I think actually, but I now interpret it as being who you actually are. So I'm both of those individuals. I'm work Jess and I am, mum Jess and all the other versions of myself. But I now kind of present as one individual as opposed to, this person over here and this person over here, and a lot more kind of confident in that. But that's taken me a long old time to achieve. And I think everybody goes through that transition at different speeds with different challenges. And I think something that organizations can do is facilitate that transformation and make that easier by having the right support in place, because I think we're all, I always describe it, when you first find out that you're pregnant and you suddenly, I always describe it as like I opened this door one day and on the other side of the door was like a whole other planet that I just didn't know existed until I fell pregnant. And all of a sudden you're just aware of this whole new world of things. And maybe I was particularly, I don't know, self-obsessed pre-becoming pregnant and just didn't really look up and around very much. But that to then try and find my place in that space and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to do things, how we wanted to parent together and that type of thing was just an absolute minefield for me. You probably gathered like I'm a massive overthinker about these things, sit there contemplating things too much.
No,
But
but
that's definitely
me
how it
too.
felt.
And I'm like, oh yes, I relate to this because also
Yeah.
I got pregnant untimed, and I think a huge part of that was I wasn't ready for this door to open, and I
Mm.
took the test. The door had been opened, and I was like, where am I? and then it took like I say until last year, so like 5 years later, to be like, oh, here I am. I know where I am now,
Yeah,
and
it takes
I
time.
think
And
it's. Oh, sorry.
sorry. I was just going to say you constantly hit reset as well when you have another child. So I had 4 children in the space of 7 years. So every time I kind of
Wow.
started to feel like myself again, I then got pregnant again. And it's
Yeah.
just this like constant sort of up and down. And this is the first time I've got to 2 years after having a baby and I've not had another one. And actually, you're like, oh, do you know what I do? I think it takes a massive amount of time to feel like you again. But then it's not the same you as it was before. So yeah, it's just this whole, just this whole new space and this whole new you and building your confidence back up in that. It's tough.
And like putting it in your example that you've had 4 kids in 7 years, and do you think it's because a lot of people now change jobs every 2 and 3 years, which is great, it's different careers, different jobs for everyone, but businesses don't feel they can, or now if we're talking about this awareness that like you need to support women through this transitional change they're going through, that they don't really have the time for that because like for example I was working for a startup very much profit driven, and it's like, well, in 2 years we want to be here, do we have time to support a transitioning you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. I
Mm.
think there are two schools of thought. So there are the organizations out there that I've already mentioned who value the individual and what they bring to the organization, know that they've invested time in you and are prepared to wait and are willing to kind of work around you. At the complete opposite end of the spectrum are, I always tell this story and I shouldn't, I hope they never listen to the podcast, but on a Friday, so I work like Monday to Thursday, and on a Friday I get to be that stay-at-home mum for the day. And
Mm.
we go off and we do a music group, and I hang out with 3 other mums who are all stay-at-home mums. So we joke about me having this like secret life Monday to Thursday. So every so often I'll send them something that I've done. And I did a talk at Google HQ for the Happiness Index recently, and it was recorded. So I sent them the recording, and I sort of laughed and said, "This is what I'm doing, when I'm not with you girls." So one of them sat and watched it with her husband, who is a finance director in a boutique consultancy. I won't say any more than that. And he watched it and he's like, yeah, love what she's saying, kind of totally get it. But really everyone's replaceable, aren't they? So what's the business case for it? And that for me was the nugget of the absolute other end of the spectrum, because actually if that is the mentality of an organization, everyone's replaceable, and it doesn't matter whether it's you or whether it's someone else sat in your shoes, that's just, you're never ever going to get that support. But I guess what I'm here to say is the ones at the other end of the spectrum, and there are a lot of them, I think it's just a case of finding them, and those employers that do think very differently to that, shouting about it and helping them profile their brand. So the types of organizations coming through the careers after babies accreditation, for example, are, you've got Paramount in the film industry, you've got Kia in the
Amazing.
automotive industry, we've got IMA Home Research Laboratory in the marketing space. Like there's lots of student unions, actually, really interestingly. So we've got Greenwich Student Union, Gloucester, Lancashire, a couple of others. There are pockets of these organisations that genuinely believe in supporting working parents, genuinely believe in inclusive environments where everybody brings a value to that organisation and being there for the times that matter. Because at the end of the day, 85% of people will become parents. So
Yeah.
actually, if you're going to, from an organisational perspective, if you're going to look at supporting people through a journey, this is a very wise one to start with. Otherwise, the costing of attracting new people is obviously a big driver, but
Mm.
actually, why wouldn't you want people in there that have relationships and established and have delivered for you?
And can bring something new once they become parents, which we
Absolutely, yeah,
miss, I
but which
think.
is a massively underestimated or undervalued thing. Like how many more skills do we learn as mums? I think I'm just an all-round better person for becoming a mum than
And definitely
before.
nicer.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm a bit more
And
tired, but
yeah, definitely more
besides
tired,
that,
but nicer,
yeah.
even when tired, is a real skill.
Yeah, exactly. And a much better line manager, actually, I think is a real,
Yeah,
not talked about thing. My ability to relate to people in different circumstances was
yeah,
improved tenfold by, being a parent than before.
yeah. And yeah, that and it all starts, I guess, with these small organizations, and the whole point is then you're shouting it. We start to see improvements, growth there, and then there's more of a business case in organizations where they aren't like this, and then you're also raising a future where they just have these core values and set in them that you support working parents.
Yeah, I always say my mission is with Careers After Babies is to create a cohort of world-class employers of working parents. And what I mean by that is let's get those organizations that are really good at this and let's learn from each other and let's showcase what they're doing and provide the best thought leadership to then inspire that next generation. So we've got a larger business offering where we accredit them, and then we've got a smaller business membership as well. So we're saying to those smaller businesses, look, come and learn how to do it, kind of embed it all from day one, so it's
Mm.
not then this big difficult transition that you have to do later on to try and fix things. I think a lot of small business owners will tell you it's just not something they think about until someone turns around that they employ and goes, hey, I'm pregnant, and then they're like, oh God, what do I do?
And that's what happened to me, and it does not
Yeah.
feel good to be the woman where they're like, "We need to bring in a policy. Here's what stat back pay looks like." And you're like, "Great."
Yeah. Yeah.
Underwhelming.
And quite often asking you to go and do something about it as well. So there's quite a
Yes.
few organisations I've spoken to where it's the woman who's like, oh, I'm pregnant. It's a small organisation. They don't know what to do with me. And that really sticks with me as you being in a really vulnerable time in your life when actually you want someone to kind of hold you a bit and say, hey, look, we've got this. One of our themes within the accreditation is called empathetic leadership, and another one is consistent nurture and support. Because I believe what you want when you're, like I said, going through that vulnerable period of saying we're starting a family is for your organization to say, it's okay, don't worry, I've got you, you've got a job to come back to, you're going to have financial stability, everything's going to be okay. What you don't want is them to go, oh shit, sorry, I shouldn't swear. Oh shit, I don't know
You can
I
swear, it's
don't know.
fine.
Okay, fine. I don't know what to do with you. I've not come across this. Can you
Yeah.
go and do some digging? And like you say, those two emotions are very different. And I think
Yeah.
most women will tell you very much which camps they want to be in.
Yeah, yeah, because you like you said, it's opening that door, and it's like, oh, I've just discovered all of this. Oh, wait, now I'm responsible for it. I remember my
Yeah.
company, they were like, oh, we want you to be the flagship of how well we've done this. So I felt this pressure that I had to go back well, even when it was not being handled well. And it was like, and as women, we can already do stuff like, oh, it's my fault, kind of
Yeah.
talking to ourselves, can't we? And just to go back then a bit on your career journey and when you'd gone back to work, how long was it before you left and went self-employed between, or how did that happen?
So I went back 5 months after my eldest was born. And I think I lasted about, I'm just trying to work it back from the age gap between them. So I think I lasted probably about 8, 9 months maybe. And I was in tears most days. So I'd come home absolutely sobbing. I supposedly did 4 days a week, but there was always calls that I would have to dial into on a Friday morning. My baby was very, I don't even know how she knew to do this, but she'd be really stroppy with me. Basically, it would have nothing to do with me all day. It would take me all day Friday to kind of get her to like me again. I'd be with her Saturday and Sunday, and then I'd obviously
Oh,
appear
baby.
off Monday to Thursday again. Yeah, and she'd be livid with me.
Oh,
And I
and so
found,
Friday was your hardest day, basically, trying
yeah,
to get a baby to like
yeah,
you and
exactly.
take
Trying to get her
calls.
to be my friend again.
Yeah.
And then the Sunday night blues were really real. I was doing lots of traveling. And I just found it really, really tough. And then in the end, I said to my husband, look, we were going to have a second one fairly soon. Let's just do it now. And this time I'll take a year off. Luckily, the maternity policy was good. I'll take a year off, and in that time I'll figure out kind of next steps. And during that time, I figuring out next steps meant quitting, because I just couldn't face going back. I think the issue then was that I was, as I said, I was quite senior, to trying to find a job. Everybody has a different balance. For me, working about 3.5 days a week is my ideal, because then for the, I'm kind of doing half a week working, half a week month full-time mumming. Trying to find something that came anything close to that at the level that I was looking at
Yeah.
pre-COVID was just nigh on impossible. And I think I had a couple of conversations and just thought this isn't worth it. And I'd always had this. So both my parents were self-employed. I'd like been doing my dad's books from the age of about 11. So I think I'd always had this
Fantastic.
in the back of my mind, at some point in life, I will set up my own business. And I, decided to set up a platform to help try and find parents. So my thinking was always, if you're a small business, you need a high level of skill, but not necessarily on full-time hours. So if I can match up mums who have a high level of skill but don't have any hours to give with these businesses, then this will work amazingly. So I went into business with a friend of mine, and we launched this platform and built up quite a good brand, won a couple of awards and that type of thing. But it launched a couple of weeks before the very first lockdown. So our first year, whilst everyone was talking about flexible working, nobody was spending any money. It was our first business that we made, numerous mistakes along the way, as you do, but you live and learn. And then I think, if again, kind of being hard on myself looking back on that journey, we were distracted perhaps by trying to be something we weren't. So some bigger organizations sort of approaching us and saying, oh, we kind of quite like what you're doing. Would you work with us? And then finding ourselves trying to find people for very random jobs, all over the UK where we might not have had representation. I think we were kind of distracted by that. In the midst of it all, I had, just before we launched the business, I had my third baby. And then 2 years in, I had my fourth baby. So we kind of made the business sort of work till then. But I think the reality of it was me being drawn more to supporting businesses with bigger solutions on this sort of thing, and finding it much tougher than I thought. Anyone in recruitment, hats off to you, because people are not very nice to recruiters. I found that
Yes.
side of it quite tough.
Literally had a conversation about that with a business owner yesterday about who provides recruitment.
Yeah, they're so tough and so thick-skinned, and I wasn't really set up for that. That's not the world that I had come from. So if anyone was ever, small businesses were absolutely amazing, but I think, as like I said, kind of distracted by bigger organizations. You very much, whilst I saw it as a diversity and inclusivity play, organizations saw it very much as a recruitment piece. And then when you were asking them to spend money, sort of saying, well, actually I can spend this amount with you, or I can spend this amount over here where I get access to a much bigger pool of candidates, we were kind of continually losing out. So I started to do more kind of supporting organizations on fixing some of the underlying issues rather than focusing on that. And then but the story goes, I was invited to talk at an APPG, and I wanted to take with me some data that obviously told the narrative around what I saw happening to women. And I couldn't find it, so I put a survey out thinking I'd get a small number of responses. Actually got loads, and loads of really rich data. So I wrote the Careers After Babies report, which was published. It went viral on LinkedIn. It was absolutely incredible. So it was used. The data's been used all over the world and still is. It still gets, multiple downloads a day. I'm very kind of fortunate from that perspective. And from there, just loads of organisations got in touch, kind of saying, we can't believe this data, it's absolutely awful, what can we do to fix it? So I started to, I guess, with my strategy and diversity kind of hat back on, just started to build up that view of what good looks like, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of businesses to find out what they were doing and why they were successful, and talking to lots of parents still. And yeah, that's how the kind of Careers After Babies framework was born. So now we can assess organisations against where they are. We report back to them on how things are in their organisations, and then we work with them to roadmap them to accreditation. So it's about, genuinely transforming businesses to become better employers of working parents, rather than, ticking some boxes and giving them a badge.
Yeah. And I love that. Thank you. I've downloaded the report myself because I was interested. And it was fun, it was eye-opening because it was like it was what we knew.
Mm.
But finally there was data, and which is what matters to these organizations, isn't it? Like, it is all about the data, and they could say, oh, it's because parents don't want to work here. If it, from that perspective, I'm sure there's many that have tried that route around it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing. So lots of organisations will say that, mums don't really want to come back to work. But
Yes,
actually,
it's putting the
99,
blame on us again. It's us not being ambitious. That's the
yeah.
issue.
Yeah, whereas actually we found 98% of mums want to come back to work, and 86% of them would choose to work 3 days or more. And then I think it's still 52% would want to work 4 days or more. So actually, kind of like you say, it takes that off the table. That's not the issue. That's not the challenge. We do want to come back to work. I think there's a stat that says something like, I think it's 74% of families in this country need two parents to work.
I
So it,
actually have that stat written down here and wanted to
yeah.
talk about that because that stat blew my mind, because I think the whole thing, circling back to the judgment, going back to work quickly when I was untimed and had stat mat pay, I'm like, do you guys know my financial situation here? And gonna tell me like how much it costs and what the long-term future is me and my husband have put together with our financial goals. And that stack would be something I could throw out at them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just like you said, it's things that just aren't, the way you've put it is exactly right. It's the things that we knew but we didn't know. And I think that's what's so shocking about it, and why it kind of resonated for so many people, was that actually, oh my God, it happens. I always talk about how, people knew that it maybe happened to them, and maybe it happened to their friend, and maybe it happened to their
Yeah.
sister, and they're like, oh, but we're still, it was just us. So to actually go out and have nearly 1,000 women consistently tell you the same thing, because the stats they're quite extreme, they're not like it's not like 50-50 on things. It is 98% women want to work, 87% of women can't make full-time work alongside. These numbers are high, and they're consistent across all areas of the UK, across all industries, across all of the different intersectionalities. So this is a universal mum thing, and I hope that's what it brought to the fore.
And it makes it a parent thing, full stop, when you're saying
Mm.
74% of families in the UK need both parents to work. And it's absolutely right. I remember reading years ago that we now base our mortgages on two people,
Yeah.
and and until we have children, we base everything. Most of, obviously I don't know the stats on this, but that's just the norm. It's two people getting a mortgage, you do your bills, you do your, spending money, everything like that, as a couple with two incomes. And then you have kids and you have more outgoings, so you've got childcare and everything that comes with kids. And
Mm.
then one of you can't work in the same way.
Yeah. The stat that we found was that so 74% of women are earning less or the same as they did before they had children. Like 74%, so 3/4 of us end up earning less, and we're doing so much more. I also feel I need just to call out quickly here. So I'd love to do more on single parents, because I think
Yeah.
absolute kind of hats off to them. How the hell do you do it financially, physically? Yeah, any of the ways. I spoke to a lady yesterday who was a single mum of 5 children that she kind of had to make work, and it blows my mind. It's like you say, two parents is tough enough, but doing it on your own is so hard.
Yeah, I think that's actually my mum was a single parent, and I think when you've been brought up with that, it makes you understand so much more the importance
Yeah.
of individual financial wealth, and not just wealth, but health, let's say, financial health. And for me it might mean wealth, but not for everyone. But just that important piece of like, well, you don't really know what's certain in life, especially with redundancies to come to either person kind of thing. But it is that importance of knowing that you these women are on a back foot, and then something could happen, and then they're that sole provider, and they've had years out of work. I still see posts all the time of people who are like, I've not worked, XYZ, babies, all of that, and they want to get back into the work, and they're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and I think, do you know, the other thing that happens, I think, is you change as a person. So actually to think about going back to doing the exact same thing that you did before also doesn't feel right. And I've had this. So in between the businesses, thinking, oh my, like what am I going to do money wise? We bought the house that we hope to stay in if we can afford to stay in it long term. But you have that. I would then was like, well, maybe I should go and get a job, and maybe I shouldn't pursue careers after babies because financially it might not be the right thing to do. But actually, what do you do? So you look back at your skill set, you look back at the role that you had before, and you look at the things you've done since, and it doesn't all necessarily correlate to something obvious where you say, oh, actually, well, that's where I should direct my attention. And I think that's really tough as well. As well, for me, the coaching thing is massively important and beneficial, and different types of coaches for different conversations. So I think if you are a returner out there looking to get back in, there are so many amazing resources out there. And this is the type of thing we'll add to our parent space on the website, actually, but around who can you go to talk to help you figure some of that stuff out. I've been really fortunate in previous times in my career where if I've been thinking about kind of changing direction, there's been someone I've been able to go to who's done some good sort of skills mapping exercises. And I definitely came close to it last year. I think if it hadn't been for the way this report landed and took off, then I might be doing something very, very different now. Fingers crossed it will grow at the rate that it's looking like it might, and I won't have to, but it's still, I think for anyone that's self-employed, it's still a real, possibility that something like that could happen at any point.
Yeah, thank you for being so open about that, because I think there'll be a relief, because I think sometimes you can put people on a pedestal, like Careers After Babies report
Mm.
went viral. You've got some amazing brands interested working with you, but you've still got to keep your feet underground on the ground and think, right, okay, hopefully I can stick with this, but I might have to have a change.
Yeah, and it's really hard. I certainly, the first time around with that works for me, found that the only business owner stories I was coming across were the ones that said, oh yeah, my business just took off. And there was I having a daily battle of literally what felt like pushing water uphill to have some of these conversations, thinking, well, hang on a minute. Well, everybody's saying to me, this is a great idea. And I have mums coming out of my ears saying, thank you. We've been absolutely screaming out for this. And yet it's not working. And I think if you've been successful in employment and then you find yourself in that situation, it's really, really hard. And I really felt that lack of I don't know, other stories out there of people saying that a similar thing had happened, which then means when you come to think about your options, so when reality dawns one day and you're talking about what do I do? Do I close this business? Do I not? Do I go and get a job? Do I start something else? It makes it that much harder because you've got nobody out there that you can kind of look to say, actually, I'm not on my own. And the feelings of being a failure that come with it. I've had quite a lot of coaching over the last few months and kind of really recognizing the one journey coming to an end and a new one beginning, and the difficulties of those transitions. Again, I think maybe it's something that I'm on my own at struggling with, kind of these moving from place A to place
Not
B
at all.
and getting my head straight with that. But I think, yeah, there's nothing more important than going out and getting some, if you are like me, then going out and kind of getting some support and getting you through those, because it's quite a lonely place otherwise. And you can have feelings about it that you almost don't realize are there until you know one of those times where you look back and say, well, actually, how do I feel about that, and realize kind of how much it took out of you. So
Mm.
I've vowed from the day I said I was going to set up my own business that I'd always be brutally honest about the journey, because I think that that's what we need to hear. We need to hear that it isn't always rosy and it doesn't always take off from day one. You know, it's
Yeah.
tough.
You have seasons, you lose like life seasons, you have business seasons, you lose
Yeah,
clients,
right.
you have like
Yeah,
hurdle after hurdle. And it's so true. And I love your point on coaches there, or having it, or businesses, you guys having coaches affiliated to you for businesses as well. Because I think that was never, I had no idea these coaches existed back like
yeah.
5 years ago, because I just wasn't in that space. And then when I finally found it, or I found one, like they were just like, yeah, I mean, we can't afford it for you, but we'd love their details so we know for future. And I was like, oh,
Thanks.
okay.
It's
So
fun. I
maybe
mean,
a business coach could have helped with all the feelings that
yeah.
I needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important. I think particularly in the UK, we sometimes look at these types of things as being quite kind of American and therapy speak and that type of
Yeah.
thing. But there is a reality about your career is such a big part of what you do, and you spend so many hours at work that inevitably it's back to this identity thing, isn't it? Inevitably it becomes caught up in your identity of who you are and what you're about. And I think lots of us need help figuring that out sometime. But I was the same because I was quite senior. I was lucky enough to have a career coach for a period of time, which is how kind of coaching came to mean something. And it was absolutely invaluable to me. So I think, but like you said, it's not until you've used it or you've been exposed to the benefits of it that you think, oh, actually, that might be a good place to start. I think if you find if coaching isn't something you can afford, then mentors can be great. My only kind of note of caution on that is somebody who isn't impartial will come at it very much from like their perspective and their journey. And some people are great at not doing that, but others not so much. But again, there are some great mentoring networks out there. So there's Mentor Mums, which are absolutely brilliant. So they, particularly for women returning from maternity leave or after a return break, they will match you up with someone else in a similar industry but in a different company, so you've got someone that you can go to talk about the difficulties of returning and that sort of thing without it feeling like you're undermining your credibility at work. Yeah,
I
another
love that. Well, I'm going to we need to share that away,
yeah,
because that would have been another useful tool back in the day. But I guess that's it when you talk about it. When you say you were in a leadership position, and I was in a startup kind of middle management kind of area. And I think that's something else I really felt as well. Like for the leaders, there was like there is this coaching, you'd experience coaching because you'd been in a director role. And that's what I felt. I was had all the ambition, just wasn't there yet.
yeah.
And I felt there was that real missing ground on. I'd love your thoughts on this from interviewing women, because just thinking of this now, I had this real middle ground where I was like, well, I don't fit in with the directors and stuff, and they will know that straight away, but I'm ambitious and want to keep that. Where's my space kind of thing? And it felt like it was just expected there wasn't going to be a space for me over the next few years, let's say.
Yeah, I think so. I always talk about how the inequality of female representation at leadership is directly linked to um, having children. So,
Mm.
you know, we know this, and you've just said it. So you kind of reached that certain point, wasn't quite sure of next steps, and then it probably coincided with you then deciding to have children. Because for
Yeah.
most people on that sort of linear career path, that's exactly what happens, and that's when the timing falls. In terms of, I think I was quite fortunate in that I had a really good sponsor throughout my career. So
Mm.
he he placed bets on me and put me into positions that not a lot of other people would have done. And I think that came with pros and cons. So I was very much thrown in at the deep end and had to hold my own in front of more rooms of 50-year-old men when I was like 27 than I can possibly count, which is really hard, kind of trying to get those people to take you seriously in a male dominated insurance environment. But equally it toughened me up, and it made me, be able to hold my own in conversations and that sort of thing. The other thing that I was always really open about was my desire to move on. So I don't think I ever spent more than sort of 2.5 years in a role, which I think is fairly typical for people moving fairly pacily through their careers. And I always had this it takes me like 6 months to learn a job, 6 months to get good at a job, and then I'm brilliant at it for like a year and a
Mhm.
half, and then I'm like, all right, I'm bored now, let's
Bored.
move on. And
Mm.
starting those conversations as you're coming towards the end of that second year. And the other thing is, I think if you're I think we weigh ourselves down with fear, and particularly with women, I'll come on to in a minute, we weigh ourselves down with that fear of the unknown and change. So my husband works in the sort of headhunting space, and he'll say men are easy. If I wave a big enough check in front of their face, I can entice them to go anywhere. Women, not so much. Women want to know about what's the culture like, what's the environment like, where am I going to sit? And I think and I'm talking quite university here, won't apply to everybody, but in the main, we consider a lot more factors than just what's my financial paycheck going to look like at the end of it. And I think that's probably because the environments are generally a bit harder for us to operate in.
Mm.
And I think when you then throw in things into the mix, like, oh, hang on, we're thinking about having a family at some point in the next few years. Therefore, what's the maternity policy look like? What are the flexible working options? If you're thinking that far ahead, that then adds another layer of complexity, which makes it difficult. Then when you come out of the other side of it all, it's then is this an organization that I can progress in as a parent? So have they got this nailed that actually they're not only bringing their parents back for maternity leave, but they are able to then continue with their career progress? And again, some organizations great at this, a lot of them just stop and they just write people off, right? You've had kids now, so that's it, you stop. That's sort of the end of the journey. And that again is another one of our themes in Careers After Babies is called Parents Are Progressing, and it's really about helping organizations help their parents get a handle on this and thinking, once they come back to work, well, actually, how do I start thinking about my future and my fulfillment in my career? It might not be an immediate thing now, but actually still making sure I've got an eye on it. I don't know whether we've got time, but there's this, I'll just tell
Oh
you very
yeah, please
quickly.
do.
There's this amazing story about a lady at GlaxoSmithKline. So I met her at an event last year, and I was talking to her about the inconsistency in line managers, and they're basically the ones that make or break your experience depending on what you have. And she said to me, oh, I had this incredible manager in my during my pregnancy. So she said she went off she had been part of a team who were developing a medication for migraine, and she was the assistant team leader, and she'd been in that role for ages. And her next move was very much the team leader for this medication development. She fell pregnant, went off on maternity leave, was off for 8, 9 months, came back into the role. And within 2 weeks, the team manager said, right, I'm moving on to a new project. It's your role. She's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, the baby's just gone into nursery. I've just had him. I can't possibly get my head around trying to do something new. And this guy said to her, you can, and you will. And I'm going to support you through the journey. I'm going to make sure they maintain all of your flexible working. They're going to carry on with the coaching, but you've got this, you can do this. And he helped her through that interview stage, and she got the job. So within a year, she'd got a promotion and she'd got her baby. And she's
Oh,
eternally grateful to this person for doing it. I know, such an amazing story, but one that is so, he didn't have to do a lot other
no.
than stick to his guns, support her through it and give her a little bit of confidence to get her through that. And now she's really happy. She's got a baby,
Mm.
life has settled back down. Yeah, it's challenging because any new job is challenging, but just what an amazing example of what a little support goes such a long way.
Yeah, just using his privilege and kind of being aware of it to
Yeah.
support someone else, and that, and someone who literally said I can't,
Yeah.
and you can. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because it is that with line managers, which is a whole other area we could go on, but why also supporting parents is great, which we'll do another podcast on that. Progressing parents, was that what it's called? I love that
Yeah,
because it's,
progressing. Yeah.
yeah, there's so much to take on that. But I also love delving a little bit about the discussion of like, how do you do it? And you mentioned Mummy Day. I have a Mummy Day as well. It's on a Wednesday. It's my Mummy
Yeah.
Day. So I felt
Yeah.
that was easier.
Yeah. Break up the week a bit. I get that.
Yeah, I've felt normally shit hits the fan on a Friday or a Monday, so therefore Wednesday is perfect.
A good one. Yeah.
So how, it does on paper, it sounds like ideal because your husband's also, freelance as well. But you have 4 children, which is double the amount of mine, but apparently triple in reality, probably is what I'm guessing.
I don't know. I don't think there's much difference between having 3 and 4, to be honest, other than the logistics. So, yeah, look, it's a lot, and our house is ridiculously hectic. But we have a few ground rules. We So we split the drop-offs and pickups evenly. We're both generally both there, apart from odd days for the breakfast chaos, getting everyone out the door. And then we try and both be around for homework, dinner time as well. You know, John will do like a day in London sometimes, but he won't be. But he tends to do a day a week. But on the whole, we're both in it together. So
Yeah.
if you ask any of the school teachers, they'll say they see us 50-50, it's interchangeable. They still always pick up the phone to me first when something goes wrong, which really annoys me, especially like if I'm off for a day. But we've not quite conquered that one yet, but we'll get there. And we do bedtime together. Look, I know, like I said earlier, fortunate A, that I have a partner, but B, that he is in this as I am. But there's no way that we could have 4 children and 2 businesses between us if that wasn't the case. So
Yeah.
my kind of words of encouragement to a lot of women, because I'll tell a lot of people and they'll go, oh my God, did we ever have that conversation? I'm not sure we did. We just sort of fell into this, which I think is what
Yeah.
happens. But it's never too late to pause and have that conversation about, hang on, how are we dividing this up, particularly when so many organizations now are much more accepting of dads playing a different role in their children's lives, and that's what they want to do. So with the uptick in shared parental leave, and dads kind of doing more flexible working, I think that's absolutely a conversation that we should all be having.
Yeah, making that space. I think somewhere I've heard it's making that space in the home, because outside of pregnancy, breastfeeding, it's just then it's a lot of the stuff is home admin rather than
Yeah.
just the quality time with the children. It's the
Absolutely.
logistics.
It's the packing the bags, it's the getting the shoes ready, it's making sure their uniforms out, it's the, packing lunch boxes and snacks, the musical instruments, all of the stuff. And also then the little things like having like the apps on the phone where you do reading records and that type of thing. So last year I remember getting really cross with my husband because he just didn't load that app onto his phone. And I was just like, well, when I'm speaking at an event up in London, you're then sending me a note to say, oh, can you update the media? Like,
Oh God,
don't
I had it.
don't load that on me. I don't need that. Today's your day, your thing. I should have added, actually, he has Tuesdays. That's his day with
Oh, good.
ones. He does Tuesdays, I do Fridays, and then the other 3 days we sort of jig between us.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I think it's just like I said, it's important. Not everyone does it at the start, but have it at
Mm.
some point. You can have it now, even if your kids are like in their teens,
Yeah.
and and have a reflective conversation, I guess, and be like, what wasn't equal during this time? What didn't we do so great? And can
I
you
think the
share
other
what?
thing
Oh,
I
sorry,
was just going
please
to
do.
say quickly, it's about setting an example to your children as well. So our
Yeah,
kids know that, daddy's around as much as mummy. And it means that I'm not always, I mean, still a lot of the time, it's only me they seem to bug in the toilet. But,
of course.
still that knowing that daddy's there to answer questions as much as I am. And I think that definitely helps me mentally not feel so responsible for everything on my own all the time.
And it's showing different traditional jobs. Like my husband
Yeah,
does all the cooking, and so it's kind of giving that
definitely.
representation that both the boys are. I mean, I should do better cooking, but I don't. But
I
both of
can't
them.
pick
But it will be expected that, yeah, maybe in their homes they won't do all the cooking, but they will be able to do the cooking kind of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you share what's next for Career After Babies? Have you got anything coming up you'd like to share, promote?
So we are doing all sorts at the minute. So it's a pretty busy year for us. So we obviously launched the accreditation last September. We launched a small business membership in December. We've got a parent space launching on the website shortly. So like I said, you'll be able to access roles with the employers that are part of Careers After Babies. And this year for me is really just about talking to more organisations and getting more of them on board with the accreditation, because I think this is something that is needed for organisation and needed for us as working parents to be able to know that if we go for a job with an employer who says they're going to do things, that they're actually going to do it and that their
Yeah,
culture reflects it. And that's what this external benchmarking will enable them to do.
love that. Thank you so much. And finally, so as someone who's been through it, and if there's anyone who's going through it now and they're experiencing a really tough return to work in an environment and just wanting to quit everything, do you have any advice you can share with them from your experiences?
Do you know what? It's horrible. I think the first thing is you're not on your own. So many of us go through something similar, and it's horrible and it can feel really lonely and rubbish, but it doesn't have to be. There's lots of support out there. So I think if you're pregnant or on maternity leave, Pregnant Then Screwed are amazing. If you are back in the workplace and struggling with flexible work requests, then Working Families have a free legal helpline where you can talk about your flexible working arrangements. ACAS are brilliant. I think one of the things we tend to shy away from when things don't go our way is submitting grievances and following an official process. But actually, I think if more of us did that, and organisations are being confronted with it more and more, then they might actually start changing their behaviours. And yeah, just reach out to other mums, kind of talk to people, because I think that finding some solace in other people having gone through the same thing is really important, and you need that support.
Yeah, the power of community and
Absolutely.
knowing you aren't alone. Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you for all the work you're doing. It's super appreciated here, and I really look forward to seeing Careers After Babies and your journey in 2024.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jess.